Chapter 7a/n. I would like to thank everyone that added this story to their favorites and follows, as well as everyone that reviewed the last chapter. She should be imprisoned. You promised me that you would bring him back? Why didn't you bring him back? Naruto blinked her eyes and stared at the ceiling. Where was she? Was she in Konoha? Twisting her back around, the blonde-haired girl relaxed her shoulders when she caught sight of her school uniform dangling on the chair. Her former teammate's face was just a memory now. Her words no longer had any sway over her. The council had no control over her. She was no longer in the village. She looked at the ceiling, wondering not for the first time if she made a good call. Should she had stayed in Konoha and faced the reality like the strong person that she claimed to be? She missed her home, from the ramen to even Kiba and his big mouth. She missed yelling at Kakashi-sensei with Sakura when he tried to make up some stupid excuse for why he was late. She wanted to go back to the times where she teased Hinata on her crush on Kiba, and the times where she would annoy Shikamaru about the clouds that he loved to watch. Shaking her head, the blonde waddled her way to the chair and unbuttoned her pajamas shirt. As she buttoned up her shirt, the blonde hesitated when she saw the scar that marked her skin. Why did the bastard left her alive? Just one more cm and he would have succeeded in killing her. It wasn't like Sasuke to miss. The bastard was a lot of things, but he would never miss something like this, not when he spent years training to kill his big brother. If he really wanted to kill her, then what made him change his mind in the last minute? So many questions, but there weren't enough answers. She buttoned the last button and put on her skirt before making her way out of the door. Slipping on the headphones into her ear, the blonde-haired girl allowed the music to redirect her thoughts to something else. What were they going to do today? Were they going to be facing another battle scenario? She hoped not. She didn't want to be partnered up with Bakugo again. The asshole had brought back too many bad memories, memories that she just wanted to forget about. Maybe they were going to do something normal for once. It would be nice if she just had to worry about passing a test today. Naruto-chan. The blonde-haired girl pulled out her headphones and blinked at the sight of Itsuka running towards her with a large smile. Had she already reached school? She scanned the area and then flickered her eyes to the bus stop, before realizing that the girl must be going on the same bus as her. For a moment, she considered the idea that her acquaintance was stalking her. It was a stupid thought, because who would stalk her? Hi, Itsuka-chan. The orange-haired girl beamed, and before the blonde could open her mouth to protest, the girl linked their arms together as they went up the steps of the bus. Why did she have to run into the girl when she wasn't in the mood to interact with anyone? Why couldn't she have run into a person that she didn't know all too well? Now, she needed to actually make an effort to talk to her, or else it would seem very rude of her not to care about what she had to say. Honestly, it must be her bad luck today. You look like shit today. Naruto blinked her eyes at the girl and Itsuka tapped her under eye at her. You got dark circles under your eyes, which means that you haven't had a good night's sleep. Do you want to talk about it? It was just some stupid nightmare, the blonde lied, shaking her head. The orange-haired girl nodded, but Naruto could see there was doubt in her eyes about the truth behind her words. She wasn't exactly lying about her dream, but there was no way that she could tell her that she spent the whole night remembering the past. No one would ever believe the life that she had. How could they? Konoha and the other hidden villages were kept in a veil that separated their two countries. Only the government knew about this, as well as the people that protected the veil. Everything else was kept a secret from them. You know, before we go to class, we might need to put some makeup on you, Itsuka said. Naruto jerked her head at her acquaintance, who had a large smile on her face. What did she mean, she need to put some makeup? There was no way in hell that the girl could make her put any makeup on her face. She spent years avoiding the abomination. She was here to become a hero, not become some floozy girl that didn't take her work seriously. There was no chance that she was going to let herself end up like Sakura and Ino. She wasn't going to disguise her face. Why are you making that face, Naruto-chan? I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do, Itsuka said. I just thought that you wouldn't want to make it obvious to everyone that you are exhausted. The blonde-haired girl looked down at her skirt and stared at her hands. She hadn't thought that the girl was considering about what she wanted. She thought that the girl wanted to force her to do something that she didn't want to do. Why did she think like that? Maybe it was because all the girls used to tell her that she would look decent if she wore some makeup. Maybe it was the fact that she always associated makeup with girls that didn't take their training seriously, but the point was that she was wrong to judge I'm sorry but I don't really like makeup, Naruto admitted. I didn't think you thought to cover up the fact that I had a bad night. You thought makeup were for girls that wanted to impress boys, didn't you? The blonde nodded and the orange-haired girl smiled sympathetically at her. Was she stupid to think like that? It wasn't like her thoughts were wrong. There had been days when Sakura had been late to a meeting because she was trying on some makeup. God, Naruto remembered that when Sakura and her had to share a room, that the girl would mostly put makeup stuff in front of the mirror. Sometimes, Naruto wondered why Sakura wanted to be a ninja. You know that is one reason for girls wearing makeup but there are a lot of reasons to wear it, Itsuka explained as they walked out of the bus. Sometimes girls wear it to express themselves and sometimes they wear makeup to give confidence. In fact, wearing makeup can be fun, but not everyone has to like it. I'm sorry for the way I reacted. Itsuka laughed. Why are you sorry? It isn't wrong of you to voice your opinions. Everyone have their own opinion on why they wear stuff, but I didn't want you to think so negative about it. So do you want me to help you cover up your dark circles? The blonde sighed and nodded her head. There was no way that she was going to class with people asking her if everything was fine. She didn't need any more attention on herself. It was bad enough that everyone had been concerned about her after seeing her walk away from Bakugo. She just needed some time alone to herself so that she could get herself together. God, this was going to be a nightmare for her. First off, I would like to say good work with yesterday's battle training and that I have read All Might's grades and evaluation for each one of you, Aizawa-sensei said, drawing Naruto's attention away from the book. The man placed the piles of paper onto the table, before looking at each student with tired eyes. His eyes lingered the longest on her and the blonde-haired girl wondered what did All Might wrote about her during his evaluations. Did he mention about the fact that she walked out of the class when her battle was over? She prayed to God that wasn't the case. She didn't want him to think that she was a troublemaker. However, I would like to address a few people from the battle training. Bakugo, the blonde-haired boy grimaced as their homeroom teacher fixed his eyes on him. I want you to stop your childish behavior and grow up. If you keep this up then you will only be wasting your talent. I know. Naruto stared at the blackboard, ignoring the stare from her classmate. He could pout all he wanted, could be angry as much as he wanted but she was never going to apologize for her actions. She told him that she would interfere if he went too far, and the bastard went too far to her liking. However, she couldn't ignore the fact that he was growing up since he admitted that he was acting like a kid. The old Bakugo would have yelled but this bastard had admitted that he was in the wrong. However, she would need to keep her eyes fixed on Bakugo. Uzumaki, I want to have a talk with you after school, Aizawa-sensei said, staring straight into her eyes with no hint of emotions. Shit. What the hell were they going to have a talk about? Were they going to have a talk about her part-time job? She asked for permission to work, but they gave her permission. Maybe, they wanted her to know that she needed to have good grades if she wanted to keep her job. Now on to homeroom business, Aizawa-sensei said, turning his attention to everyone else. Naruto relaxed her shoulders, slipping her head onto the table, but being careful to mind her eyes. Itsuka had told her that she might need to be careful since the concealer doesn't last forever. Next time, she might need to go and see a pharmacist for some medicine that could let her get some sleep. It is time for all of you to pick a class president. The blonde placed her fingers inside her ears as cheers erupted from every corner in the classroom. In just mere seconds, Kirishima was waving his seconds, yelling the words me, while Kaminari perked up from his seat. Bakugo slammed his hand on the table, waving with his other hand as he demanded for their teacher to pick him as their class representative. Even Midoriya was raising his hand up for the job. The blonde glanced at her seat partner, who seemed to look bored at this announcement. If Sakura and the other girls in the academy were here, would they consider Todoroki hot? He did have the brooding thing going on, but unlike Suzuki, the blonde-haired girl didn't sense any complete hate from him. In fact, he didn't have the same type of sneer that her best friend had. To be honest, he was just quiet but there were times when she sensed that he was gentle, and that he did care about people's feelings. If Suzuki had been like this then Naruto would understand why Sakura and all the other girls had a crush on him. She felt her cheeks burning up when her classmate shifted his eyes to look at her. Why was she embarrassed? She didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't like she was plotting how to steal his underwear or anything. She shook her head and looked at her hands, wishing not for the first time that she could just disappear. She glanced at her classmate, who raised his eyebrow, and she could only smile nervously. He blinked his eyes and the blonde wondered if she did something strange. Quiet down, everyone. The blue-eyed girl tore her eyes away from Todoroki and fixed her attention on Itza. The boy may be sitting on his chair, but there was no denying the fact that her classmate had his hand raised the highest. Looking at him, the blonde could understand the reason that he would volunteered himself. In fact, he looked like the stereotype of the class representative. Being a leader is a heavy responsibility, Itza proclaimed. Ambition doesn't equal to ability, and not anyone can do this job. If we want to be democratic, then our true leader must be chosen by election. But Itza, we haven't known each other long enough to build any trust, so you pointed out. Not only that, but everyone will just vote for themselves. Kirishima said. Naruto sighed and made her way towards the front. Why must she get involved? Why couldn't she just let them to deal with this mess? Oh yeah, because they were going to be idiots when it come to the process. Maybe it was time to put some of her experience to use. She might not have been a Chunin, but she still recalled the qualities that made someone a good leader. When Shikamaru became a Chunin, she hadn't been upset because she knew the reason that the Hokage thought the lazy ass was good enough to be a shinobi. Then if we are going to do this, then I need all of you to think properly, Naruto said, drawing everyone's attention to her. All the students whipped their head at her, but the blonde ignored their disbeliefs as she picked up the chalk from the blackboard. We need to pick someone that doesn't pick fights, someone who actually pay attention to details, but most of all, we need someone that can act as a bridge. Now I'm not telling you who to vote, but I will inform you that my vote goes to Itza. Every single one of them blinked their eyes at her, looking at her like she was insane for voting for the boy. Did they actually think she was going to vote for herself? She knew she was terrible for the job. For her to lead them meant that she trusted herself not to screw things up. It meant that she thought she was responsible, and Naruto knew that she was nowhere responsible for the job. She might have the confidence, but that was it. Thank you, Uzumaki-san. Naruto. Everyone blinked their eyes and the blonde made her way back to her chair. I don't like being called Uzumaki-san or even Uzumaki. Now if you excuse me, I'm going to the toilet. She wasn't kidding. She really needed to pee. It seemed like it was starting to become a habit for Uzumaki and him to have lunch together. Todoroki mused to himself as the blonde-haired girl took her seat in front of him. Not that he minded her company. His classmate may have her secrecy, and he might think he knew her reasons, but the girl was a contradiction. For someone who claimed that it was hard for her to interact with people, she had been able to grab everyone's attention. Why are you looking at me like that? You aren't like what you claimed to be, he said, causing the blonde-haired girl to raise her eyebrow. For someone who claimed that it is hard for you to interact with people, you don't seem to have a problem in grabbing people's attention. You got everyone to listen to you when you decided that Itza-san should be the class president and pointed out the qualities that a leader needed to have. The blonde sighed and stared out at the window. It would have taken them forever to decide who would be a good class representative, since everyone wants to lead, which would have made everything messy. So you did it to cut the time. His classmate nodded before looking down at her ramen with a strange faraway look. Shoto frowned and wondered what the girl was remembering. From the sadness in her eyes, he could guess that she was recalling the abuse that she endured. If he didn't know that Uzumaki was skittish, then he would ask her about her past. You know that you are a terrible liar. I will have you know that I'm an excellent liar, Uzumaki retorted, and Shoto blinked his eyes when he caught sight of the mischief in her eyes. Mischief suited her more than the sadness and emptiness in her eyes. With the mischief shining through her eyes, he could see that her eyes resemble electricity. Why are you looking at me like that? I am telling you the truth, believe it. His classmate groaned and slammed her head on the table, before twisting her head away from him. He didn't miss the redness in her cheeks, which made him wonder why his classmate was so embarrassed. He opened his mouth to question her, but then closed it. He didn't want Naruto to become more upset with him. It was a miracle that the girl was showing some form of emotion to him, which was more than some people could say. He shrugged his shoulder and watched as the blonde-haired girl slapped her cheeks before turning her attention to him. The mischief in her eyes died down and had been replaced with coldness. It was clear to him that his classmate did know how to express her feelings, unlike him, but she chose not to show her emotions. You know, it is kind of creepy that you are looking at me like that. Do I have some ramen on my face? Do my eyes look bad? Uzumaki groaned. I am going to blame Itsuka for the last part. Itsuka. She is a friend. Naruto said, but it sounded more like a question to his ears. The way her eyes shone with doubt told Shoto that just like him, his classmate didn't really had many friends growing up. It was almost comforting to know this, but at the same time it worried him that his classmate didn't have many opportunities to make friends. So why are you going to blame her? If I tell you then it will become obvious, his classmate explained. And since you didn't notice it, then there is no need for me to tell you. I should have expected you to say that. The blue-eyed girl raised her eyebrow but didn't say anything. Instead she flickered her eyes at their surroundings. A small frown decorated her face, but it was gone before he could even open his mouth to apologize. Something was bothering her, Todoroki realized as his classmate kept glancing around at their surroundings like she was expecting someone to attack them. Did anyone ever tell you that you are too blunt for your own good? You are the first person to bring it to my attention, Todoroki said, earning a raised eyebrow at the girl. He wasn't lying. His classmate was the first person to say this to him. During his elementary school days, everyone had fawned over him because he was the child of the number 2 hero. Some of the kids tried to become close to him because they wanted to meet his father, but he never got close to anyone. He didn't want to end up being like his father. I supposed no one would tell you that since the girls were too busy fawning over you. He jerked his head at his classmate's words and opened his mouth to protest, but the blonde snorted. You expect me to believe that you of all people didn't have any fangirls? If Sasuke had 100 fangirls, then you would have 1,000 since you are even prettier than him. I can't believe I just said that. He felt his lips twitched when the blonde-haired girl flushed a pretty shade of red. It was nice to see his classmate look embarrassed and not look so lifeless like she usually did. The redness of her cheek suited her, Shoto decided as he took a bite of his ramen. Once the blonde stopped blushing, she folded her arms against her chest and made a pout that almost reminded of a cute puppy. It isn't funny. I didn't say anything. The blonde rolled her eyes. But your face told me everything. I just told you that without any objective thoughts that you looked prettier than every guy I know. It doesn't mean that I find you attractive, it just means I am stating an obvious fact. Okay. His classmate opened her mouth but it closed when a sudden alarm pierced through the cafeteria, replacing the calm atmosphere with anxiety and panic. Within a split second, Uzumaki jumped off from her seat, forgetting the conversation that they just had. She flickered her bright blue eyes at him and he nodded his head at her, jumping up from his spot. She hadn't been the only one to hear the alarm and the warning from the school, however everyone else was just frozen in shock for what just happened. He grabbed hold of his classmate as a stampede of students shoved and clawed their way past each other. His classmate flickered her eyes at him before turning her head to look at the other students, frowning as she did so. He tightened his grip on her as more and more students shoved them. He couldn't entertain the possibility of letting his classmate getting hurt, not when he didn't know what her triggers were. Where are the teachers? Uzumaki asked, gently losing his grip on her arms. She looked around the chaos that was the canteen and then turned her eyes to him. She gestured for him to start moving with the stampede and with a reluctant sigh, he decided to do as the girl ordered. If this was a breach, then why aren't the teachers helping us? If it was dangerous, then they would be telling us what to do. What do you think is happening? I think there is more to the story than we know, his classmate answered. And I think we have nothing to worry about. Since there are no teachers telling us to run away. In situations like these, then there is always a teacher that must be here to protect the students. I mean, if she trailed off and Shoto grabbed hold of the girl's shoulder, directing her the other way as students tried to push them away. He understood what his classmate was getting at, but the problem was more to do with the fact that the stampede of students were dangerous. He glanced at their surroundings before making a wall of ice that separated them from everyone else. The blonde-haired girl raised her eyebrow. Why did you do that? Do you want to be pushed around by the stampede? Todoroki would have been so useful during the academy, his classmate muttered, eyeing his handiwork. Then again, if Todoroki had been in the academy, then I would have double the headache since there would be a war on who was cuter. Uzumaki, what are you talking about? You will pretend that you never heard a word I said. Uzumaki ordered. It was official. Shoto didn't understand a thing about girls. They had barely finished the adrenaline from the drama that was lunch when Aizawa-sensei informed them that they were going to a trip where they would prepare them for disaster relief. It really shouldn't have surprised Naruto that they were doing a training trip without any warning, since the school didn't like to give them any warning. Apparently, Surprise was to be their teacher. Frankly, she just wanted the day to be over and she could go to her part-time job. Everyone line up according to your class identification number. Itsu whistled and gestured for them to line up. Please fill those seats in an orderly fashion. Naruto shrugged her shoulders and took her spot beside Kirishima, who grinned at her. She forced herself to smile at him before turning her head to the bus in front of them. There was no reason for her to show any more emotions. It was bad enough that Todoroki made her act like an idiot, or the very least, made her show some emotions. She couldn't afford to make the same mistake again. As they piled into the bus, the blue-eyed girl ignored the murmurs among her classmates and their excited chatter. Maybe it was time for her to read the book again. Despite being a pervert, Jiraiya made a story that was enjoyable to read. It was just a shame that the book didn't get the reviews that it deserved. She had only reached chapter 4 when Azui had said something that caught her attention. It wasn't like Naruto made it her business to hear what people had to say, but the girl's words were making her brain work overtime. Midoriya-chan, Azui said. You know your quirk resembles All Might. Keeping her eyes fixed on the book, Naruto flickered her eyes at Midoriya and frowned at the panic look on his face. She licked her lips, tilted her head and remembered the words of her boss. There was nothing wrong with questioning everything, and the fact that he panicked told her that his newfound quirk had something to do with All Might. What does his quirk have to do with the hero? All Might doesn't get hurt when he uses his quirk though, Kirishima pointed out. They are already different in that way. There was some truth in his words, but Midoriya didn't always have his quirk. Naruto could still recall the days where her classmate had been bullied by his lack of quirk. No, her classmate had just got his quirk and there was a connection to All Might. The only question that she had to wonder, what was the connection? What was she missing? There was a link between them and this meant that she had to observe them carefully. You know, if we want to talk about quirks that are strong and cool, that would be Todoroki, Bakugo and Uzumaki, Kirishima said, snapping her out of her train of thought. Uzumaki's quirk is especially strong since it allows her to do so many things. She can make clones, enhances her strength and even stick to the walls. But doesn't it remind you of Uzashiokage's quirk? Naruto-chan, are you related to him? The blonde-haired girl blinked and shook her head. I don't think so, but then again, I never knew my parents or their family members. Everyone, except Bakugo and Midoriya, looked at her in shock. Didn't they know about it? Oh wait, they wouldn't know since she never talked about herself. Maybe, it would be a good idea for her to keep her mouth shut and focus on everything else. Yup, she regretted opening her big mouth. Konoha, did you find any clues about her whereabouts? Jiraiya shook his head, earning a sigh from his teammate. For the past 2 years since Naruto left the village, his teammate had asked him the same question. The moment it became known to her and the Shinobi Council that Naruto left, they ordered every available shinobi to search for the girl. Every single person who was close to the young girl had been asked to find her and bring her to Konoha at any cost. I can't understand how no one can find any clues, Tsunade grumbled, opening a bottle of sake. She poured herself a drink, gazing at it with a frown before gulping it down in one shot. It shouldn't be that hard for us to find her. We have members of the Inuzuka clan searching for her and your spy network too, but that girl is evading us. Jiraiya thinned his lips and looked out at the window, where he could see several children playing a game of ninja. There was no chance that he could tell his teammate about his actions. He could never tell her that Naruto was no longer in their continent. How could he? He broke the law by helping the girl escaped from the village. For all her boasts and smiles, Naruto had never really felt happy in this village. How could she be happy here? People stared at the girl like she was a monster. She was kicked out of the orphanage because of the demon inside of her. It was a miracle that she stayed as long as she did. If it had been anyone else, they would have run a long time ago. They would have gone crazy from the treatment that they were forced to go through. It was the main reason that he decided to help Naruto get out of the village. He should have reminded his goddaughter the amount of trouble that she would be in. It was one thing for an Uchiha to escape from the village, but it was a different story for a Jinchuriki. By leaving the village, the girl had made Konoha weaker in the eyes of the hidden village. He should have gone with his original plan for his student, but her eyes haunted him. It was her words which tore his heart. Ero Sennin, I feel so fucking tired of everything. I can't take it anymore. I can't keep pretending that I am happy and everything is okay. I just want to live in peace. I just want to live in a place where no one would look at me with judging eyes. I think I am going to become crazy if I stay here any longer. Please let me go, please. He abandoned the girl for his spy network, and not once did he stop to think about the child that his student left behind. He fooled himself into thinking that Naruto didn't need him. He thought that Minato knew what he was doing when he decided that all the adults should know that his baby girl was the Jinchuriki. Those words, along with the emptiness in her eyes, told him that the Jinchuriki needed to leave the village. He sent Naruto to Japan because he wanted to protect her from her loneliness. Jiraiya took Naruto through several countries as he tried to find information about how to send her to Japan. He tried to make jokes with the girl, hoping and praying that he would see her sass, but nothing came out of it. He wanted to see some resemblance of the girl that she used to be. Instead, he was greeted with a girl that could barely smile. Do you really want to bring her back here? Of course, I want to bring her back. Tsunade gulped down her sake and stared at him. She is the reason that I decided to become Hokage. I don't know who was the fucking fool that suggested that she should be exiled, but when I find out who that idiot is, I'm going to destroy him. If anyone should be exiled, it should be that Uchiha. Jiraiya grimaced at the woman's words. Sasuke Uchiha was one of the reasons for Naruto's breakdown. He was the catalyst for his goddaughter leaving the world that she knew and taking the chance into going into a world where no one knew her. He was one of the reasons why he had to tread carefully with Tsunade, or else he would face dire consequence if she knew what he did. Do you think Naruto is fine in wherever she is? Naruto is a fighter, Jiraiya answered. She can handle anything. Naruto is a Hokage. Why hadn't she noticed there was a hero with a shinobi title? Naruto might not have much care when it came to heroes, but how could it escape her notice? Should she have gone to a different country? A person with a shinobi title might have connections with other village. She shook her head. There was a chance that she was wrong about that. If a shinobi was in this country, then why would he become a hero? There was something odd about the whole thing. What are you thinking about? You have been reading the same page for the whole bus ride. Naruto blinked and turned her head to look at Kirishima, who looked at her with concern. Looking down at her book, she was taken back to see that her classmate was right. It had been a long time since she dazed off. The last time she could recall doing this was when she was in the academy. Although she was always daydreaming about her pranks at the time, and no one seemed to care about her lack of attention. Uzumaki Hokage, I never heard about him until now. He recently entered the hero scene about 2 years ago, Kirishima informed her. But despite being a newcomer, he is rising through the ranks. Naruto chewed on her lower lip at this information. Rising through the ranks? Maybe that is why she didn't know him. They might talk about him in the media, but there was no time for her to read the newspaper or read the magazines. If it weren't for the fact that All Might was everywhere, she wouldn't even know who he was. Maybe it was a coincidence that he had that name. Which hero school did he graduate from? She just needed to double confirm this. Shiketsuhai, Izuku answered before Kirishima could answer her question. Naruto relaxed her shoulders when she heard this. The hero really did not come from her part of the world, so there was nothing for her to be concerned about. Yet, there was something odd about this. How could her abilities be similar to the hero? She was using chakra and passing it off as her quirk. There was no one else that could do the things that she could do. But why Uzumaki Hokage? Why would he pick that name? I guess you weren't kidding when you said that you weren't related to him, Denki said, drawing her back to reality. She frowned at her classmate. I said that I don't think so, but I never said it wasn't a possibility. If I knew who my parents were, then I can confirm for a fact that we aren't related. You really don't know anything about your family? Okako asked. Naruto felt like squirming in her seat when everyone turned their eyes on her. Why did it feel like they were interrogating her? Was it that strange that she didn't know anything about her family? It wasn't like she asked the Hokage to keep it a secret from her. She spent so many years trying to find out the answers, but no matter of pleading and research would bring her the answers that she need. My parents died when I was born, Naruto finally answered, forcing herself to answer in a calm tone. There was no reason for her to be upset. She spent so many years being an orphan that it was stupid for her to be defensive. The old man that used to take care of me told me that my father died in the line of duty, and I presumed my mother died giving birth to me. Well, she couldn't tell them that the Hokage told her that her mother was a badass and died in the line of duty. It would make no sense for her to say that. Didn't the old man who took care of you tell you about your parents? It sounds like that he knew them. He died before I could ask him again about my parents, Naruto answered. He was the only link that I had to my parents. It was the truth too, because the Hokage did die before she could ask him again. He was the only one who seemed to know anything about them. She was certain that he knew who her parents were, because how could the old man be so confident to tell her that her parents hadn't abandoned her? How could he tell her without any hints of lying that they died on the line of duty? The only thing she wondered was, why would he keep it a secret? All her life, she wanted to know about the parents that she never had. Till this day, she wondered if she looked like her mother or her father. She wondered if her father had been a powerful shinobi or if he had been an ordinary shinobi. She wanted to know if her parents had any family members. She longed to know what her parents had been like as kids. She wanted to know how they met and how they fell in love. She wanted to know everything about them, but it was all taken from her. Orochimaru took away her chance of knowing the truth about her parents. He took away the two good things that she had going in the village, and she despised him for it. He took away the man that treated her with kindness, and he stole the one friend that she thought would never abandon her. He was the catalyst of her coming to this world. If the old man is dead, then who is taking care of you? Ajui asked. Take care of her? Did anyone ever take care of her? Sure, she lived in the orphanage for the first few years of her life, but the matron never cared for her. She barely protected her from the bullying and never called her by her name. If anything, Naruto had to take care of herself. Maybe the Umbu took care of her once, but Weasel was gone and Inu gave up his job. When she thought about it, her life was just depressing. I take care of myself. Naruto flung her head up and stared at the ceiling. No one wanted to take me in, and I didn't get along with anyone in the orphanage. The old hag and I agree that it was better for me to leave. If you live by yourself, then how are you paying rent? I have a part-time job that pays well. Naruto shrugged her shoulder. I don't see why it is such a big deal that I'm living by myself. Maybe it was because this country saw children as children. From her understanding of this country and the other countries surrounding them, children were not able to live by themselves. A child should never be left alone, but most of all, a child should live with someone. They didn't think it was possible for them to be independent. Kids weren't forced to grow up. This is nearly as big as Universal Studio Japan. Naruto glanced at her excited classmates and then at the parks around them. From her limited eyesight, she could see several themes in the building. There was a lake nearby, indicating that they might have some work to do in the water. She hoped that if they were going into the water, then she wasn't going to be doing all the work. During the Chunin exams, she had been the one to capture food for everyone. Okay, to be fair on her teammate, Sasuke did cook the food that she captured. I was hoping to have that reaction. Naruto turned her head around and raised her eyebrow when she saw a hero standing in front of the gates. As you can see from your surroundings, this building has every disaster and accident zone that you can imagine. The flood zone, the landslide zone and the conflagration zone are just few of the zones that you will experience today. I built this facility myself and I called this the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. While her classmates awed at the man's introduction, the blonde could only raise her eyebrows at the name of the building. Unforeseen Simulation Joint? Well, that was actually straight to the point, but then again, Konoha was not any better. The Forest of Death was literally a forest, where there was a high probability for a person to die. There were monsters that could literally kill them if they weren't careful. Yeah, she should not really judge them. 13. Where is All Might? Aizawa-sensei said, snapping Naruto from her train of thought. I thought he was meeting us here. All Might was supposed to be here? Why wasn't he here? Naruto glanced at her classmates, wondering if one of them had any idea about what happened with All Might. It seemed like no one paid attention to their teacher. Instead, they seemed happier to talk to each other about their ideas on what they were going to do today. Maybe she was overthinking about things, but 13 was holding up 3 fingers. When Naruto was younger, she made it a game to spot her Umbu guards. Whenever she spotted them, the guards would make some hand signals before hiding from her again. When she looked back, it should have been obvious that she was someone special to the village, because why would the Hokage invest so many guards on her? She shook her head and stared at her teachers, channeling her chakra into her ears and listening into their conversation. It seemed he just about reached his limit during his morning commute. 13 whispered. He is resting in the break room. Limit? Break room? Why would he have his limit? Wasn't All Might supposed to be invincible? She chewed on her lower lip. Then again, was anyone invincible? The third Hokage had been invincible in her eyes. In her happy days. She thought that the old man would be there forever. She made a stupid belief to think that the old man would simply grow tired of having the hat and give it to her when she was strong enough. She thought he would die from old age. Not once did she think he could be murdered by his own student. Before we get started, I would like to raise a point with all of you, 13 said, drawing everyone's attention back to him. He shook his head. Actually, it might be 2 points, or is it 3? Now that I think about it, there might be 4 points. Make up your mind, Naruto grumbled to herself as everyone raised their eyebrows at the hero. She glanced at Aizawa-sensei and felt her palms sweating when the man kept his eyes fixed on her. Why was he looking at her? Did he know that she lied about her birthplace? No, there was no chance in hell that they bothered to look into her past. Then again, why would he want to talk to her? He shouldn't concern himself with her. As far as everyone was concerned, she was an orphan kid that had the incredible chance of getting into this high school. No one knew about her actual past. No one knew about the terrible thing that she did. No one knew. She abandoned her village because she was nearly killed by the boy, who she thought was her best friend. No one knew that her teammate blamed her for losing Sasuke, or that the council had been planning to exile her behind Tsunade's back. Was it wrong that she wanted to breath? You should focus on 13 Sensei's speech, Uzumaki. The blonde-haired girl glanced at Todoroki, who still had his eyes fixed on their teacher as he explained the dangers of his quirk. Was it obvious that she wasn't paying attention? No one seemed to be paying much attention to her. Almost all of her classmates were enthralled by the man's words. Yet Todoroki seemed to be paying attention to her lack of awareness. I have my reasons for not paying attention, Naruto whispered. Why aren't you paying attention? Todoroki arched his eyebrow. Because I know the basics of his speech. What? You heard it a million times before. Her friend didn't answer, but it was all she needed to know that he had heard this speech before. Why am I not surprised? Next thing you are going to tell me that you are being groomed to take over your father's job. She meant it as a joke, but the tension in her friend's jaw told her that he didn't find it funny. Was there something that she was missing? Naruto didn't know Todoroki all that well, but he always gave the impression that nothing angered him. It seemed like the mention of his father would bring out the fire in him. She wondered if it was his father that gave him the scar. I meant it as a joke. I didn't mean to make you angry. He didn't answer her, and the blonde-haired girl took it as a sign that maybe she should just keep her mouth shut. I don't like talking about my father. I didn't like talking about the fact that I have no parents to everyone in the bus. She licked her dried lips and smiled sardonically. It might seem like I accepted the fact that I'm an orphan, but I never liked telling people that I have no parents. I hate it when people look at me with pity. If that is your way of apologizing, then you shouldn't apologize. She opened her mouth to protest, and her friend shook his head. You didn't know because I don't like talking about him. Todoroki looked down at her, and Naruto forced herself to look at his strange-colored eyes. Ever since her battle with Sasuke, she always made it a point not to gaze into someone's eyes. Gazing into people's eyes meant that you were willing to let them see your weakness. It meant letting them know that you don't mind being hurt, or that they know how you feel. After 3 years, Naruto was so tired of keeping her walls up. I want to thank all of you for listening. Wow, they spent more time whispering that they hadn't been able to listen to the man give his points. It probably wasn't that important, she reasoned to herself while everyone applauded him. There was nothing he could have said that she hadn't heard before. Great. First off, Naruto didn't pay attention to what their homeroom teacher was going to say. She didn't pay attention because of that strange swirling sound. She didn't pay attention because the hairs in the back of her neck was standing up. She took in several deep breaths and turned her body around to the main plaza, where a black whirlpool was forming. She might not have been here for long, but Naruto knew for a damn fact that wasn't normal in a school, even if it was a school filled with heroes. What the hell is that? Are those robots? Like the ones during the entrance exam? Kirishima asked. Naruto channeled her chakra into her eyes and focused on the group of people in the middle. There was a young man coming out. A young man, who had his face covered up with so many hands that she wanted to hurl. What was happening? She felt bile rising up as a wave of anger and hate washed over her. This anger and resentment was going to choke her to death. Uzumaki, don't even think of moving another step. Aizawa yelled at her and Naruto looked down at her feet. She hadn't even realized that she was moving. She just wanted to get rid of that source of emotions. I thought heroes weren't supposed to run away from villains. Naruto fixed her eyes on their sensei. I'm not a coward. I am going to beat those villains up even if it kills me. I'm going to beat those villains up even if it kills me. Naruto didn't know what possessed her to say those words to her teacher. She was not the same stupid girl anymore. The stupid girl would proclaim such bold words in front of her teacher. Her past self would be the girl that would act recklessly, but she was not that girl anymore. Yet as she stared at those villains, a part of her could not stand still and watch those people attack them. You are not trained to deal with them, Uzumaki, Aizawa reminded her. As her fellow students looked at her with shock. You have just recently graduated from middle school and those robots you dealt in the entrance exam is nothing compared to those villains. He is right, Uzumaki. Kaminari stuttered while the other students looked at the villains that were coming towards them. It isn't a cowardly thing to admit that we can't handle them. But I can handle them. Naruto thought to herself as she fixed her eyes on the head villain. It was true that she just graduated from middle school, but she hadn't always been a student. Before everything screwed her over, she had been a shinobi. She fought people that were stronger than these people and she survived. She had beaten a Chunin even though the odds were against her. She had luck the first time, but Naruto had experience now. I can handle them, Naruto repeated herself. I have enough battle experience that I know the hell what I am doing. We don't even know their numbers, Todoroki pointed out to her. Can you even make enough clones to sustain them? We don't know how many of them are here or what their quirks are. The better question we should be concerned about is how did they get here? Momo said, sweating at the sight of the villains in front of them. There should be intruder sensors, right? Of course there are, 13 replied. Intruder sensors? Hadn't it been activated when those news people came? Naruto frowned and looked at the villains carefully. Was it possible that they had someone who could interfere with the sensors? But how would they know where the sensors were? And why were they attacking them? If they wanted a better scene, then they should go for the main building. Something was not making sense. Why us? Naruto questioned herself as she flickered her eyes to everyone. What is so special about us? What do you mean? Okiko asked as the blonde took another step forward. The blonde-haired girl frowned and twisted her body to look at her fellow classmates. Each one of them seemed to have a normal childhood and none of their quirks were anything special. If she did not know that no one knew what she was, she would think that they were after her. She thinned her lips. Could there be something that she was missing? In the Forest of Death, Orochimaru singled them out because of Sasuke and his Sharingan. Was there something precious here? This was planned, Naruto explained. For them to come here when there is so little of us tells me that they are after something. This isn't something that they come up in a whim, this is something that requires weeks or even months of planning. The only question is why? What the hell is their objective? It isn't attention because they would need a lot of heroes or at the very least, All Might. At the very least, Izuku prompted. All Might, she finished. What better way to get attention than to defeat the best hero of all time or all the heroes in the school? Their teachers grimaced at her words and Naruto had no doubt that her teachers had the same thoughts as her. What better way to destroy hope than to defeat him? She asked herself as she took out the kunao from her pouch. It would be a wonderful way to bring disorder. There was no way she could allow this to happen. She was never going to let them accomplish this. But could she really handle them? A small voice asked herself as she stared at the villains. She might talk big, but she lost to her best friend. She could not bring him back home to the village, so how could it be possible for her to defeat them? She sucked her bottom lip. Maybe it would be better for her to leave it to Aizawa-sensei. She might screw things up again. She could not afford to screw things up. Kaminari, Aizawa-sensei said, snapping her out of her train of her thoughts. Try to use your quirk to signal for help. Kaminari tensed up but nodded his head at their teacher, who turned to her. She could see the warning in his eyes. He wanted her to obey his orders, and the girl who failed to bring her friend back wanted to follow his orders. Yet, a large part of her could not accept his order. It was just difficult for Naruto to watch her teacher fight those villains in an unfair fight. Sensei, you can't fight them all alone, Izuku yelled. Even you can't nullify all those villains' quirk. As Eraserhead, your fighting style involves erasure and a quick binding capture. A head-on battle is not. The young man put on the goggles and stared at her classmate. No good hero is a one-trick pony. Naruto shivered at her teacher's words and watched blankly as he jumped towards the villains. She glanced at her classmates and then to the approaching villains. There must be around 100 villains and the man just proclaimed that he could handle them. Was he like Kakashi in terms of talent? Now that she thought about it, she never stopped to ask Izuku or research what the man could do. She looked at Aizawa and watched with raised eyebrows as he defeated them with a couple of taijutsu move. Watching him, Naruto guessed that her teacher would be considered Chunin level to Jounin level in term of strength. However, their teacher lacked speed. If her eyes could keep up, then the man must be in genin level of speed. Aizawa-sensei can really hold his own even when outnumbered, Izuku said. But for how long? Naruto asked. Aizawa pinched his nose. This isn't the time for the two of you to analysis. Hurry up and evacuate. We need to leave before they notice us. Just as soon as her classmate finished saying those words, a black mist started to appear in front of them. The former kunoichi felt the hairs in her hand started to stand up as she felt a sinister energy coming from the mist. Why the hell did she decide to throw her kunao away? She should have kept the knife, but then again, she never entertained the idea of becoming a superhero. I am afraid that it is too late. Wait, the mist can talk now? She saw everything now. While she tried to process what the hell was happening, her classmates could only stare at the talking mist with horror. If they ever thought that they could escape, then this mist man was not going to let them go. Oh, maybe he would. Naruto bit her lips as she tried to come up with a plan. Could her clones distract him? No. Wait, wasn't there a jutsu that could create a thick mist? But she never learned that jutsu, and it would be risky for her to try a jutsu that she had no idea how to do it. Greetings, we are the League of Villains, the man said, snapping her out of her thoughts. Forgive our audacity, but today, we have come here to you. A high school, this bastion of heroism, in order to end the life of All Might, the symbol of peace. She had a feeling about this, but Naruto never thought that the man was going to admit this. Were they going to have another scenario like the one in the Chunin exam? She bit her lips. It would not be the same story since these people were more reckless. Orochimaru took them by surprise and knew everything about them, while these villains had no clue about them. We were under the impression that All Might would be here today, the man continued. It seems like his schedule was revised? Well, it does not matter. How could they know that he was going to be here? Was there a traitor in the school? Was there someone who acted like Kabuto in the school? She narrowed her eyes and put her two hands together. Could her clones take him down? Did he have a physical body? It would not hurt for her clones to attack him since there wouldn't be any harm falling on her. Well, it does not matter, my role is still the same. Just as soon as he finished saying those words, Bakugo and Kirishima charged at him. Kirishima swung his leg while Bakugo smashed his fist against the misty figure. Would it work? She had her doubts because of the fact that the guy was made out of mist. Then again, the blonde could not help but wonder how the man could eat, or even wear clothes. Boom. Not if we end you first, Bakugo declared. I bet that you didn't see that coming. Did it work? There was no way of telling if the man had been affected by the attack. In fact, when she thought about it, there was very little chance that it actually worked. From her memory of her fight with Zabuza, it was kind of hard to fight in the mist, and there was no doubt that it would be harder when a person is made up of mist. That was close, the villain declared, and Naruto did not miss the relief in his voice. Close? This meant that the man could be affected by physical attacks, but how could they know which one to attack? She placed her hands together into the familiar hand sign. Maybe if she made an overwhelming number of clones, then they could find out his weak spot. Yes, you might be students, but you might be one of the best. All of you get back. 13 yelled. The blonde-haired girl could only watch with horror as half of her classmates were wrapped around a dark shadow. Her hands began to tremble when the shadows disappeared and half of her classmates were gone. For a moment, she felt the Kyuubi's chakra leaking out of her, but she squashed it before it could get felt. This was not the time for her to make the same mistake again. Did the bastard kill them? She bit the inner corner of her cheek. Where is everyone? Can we confirm their locations? Aizawa yelled. Mizo turned the tip of his tentacle to an ear. They have been scattered, but they are all in the facility. Physical attacks are no good, Siro pointed out. This guy's quirk is too tough to handle. How do you defeat someone that has no form? She frowned and twisted her head to look at their teacher, who was defeating the villains like they were some flies. Who was more important? Does she try to distract the mist guy? Or does she try to help the teacher? Maybe she could do both. Licking her dried lips, she placed her hands together into a familiar hand sign. Was the man a pervert? What the hell are you doing, Uzumaki? Shiro asked. When I give the sign, I want Itza to close his eyes and run like the wind, and I want him to get some help. Everyone blinked their eyes at her words, and the blonde-haired girl curled her lips into a smile. If we are lucky, then the bastard is going to get distracted by what I'm about to do. Distracted? Well, I presume that since he is so proper that he is a closet pervert. What does that have to do with anything? Naruto didn't reply. Instead, she produced several of her clones. Each one of them had a grin, and the girl knew that the clones understood what her plan was. It had been 2 years since she last used this technique. 2 years since she used it as a prank, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Harem no jutsu. She yelled. Young lady, don't you have any shame? 13 yelled as her clones transformed to a sexier version of herself. Naruto could only shrug her shoulders and watched in satisfaction as her clones tackled the villain, who stood there in shock. Run, Itza. She barked at her classmate, who had a slight tickle of blood running down his nose. Okako slapped their class president on the head, snapping him out of his thoughts. The blue-haired boy nodded his head and ran full speed ahead, giving her a nod of thanks for giving him the chance to call for help. She dispersed the clones and stared at the mist guy, who was slowly getting out of the shock. Right now, there was an opportunity to help their teacher with the battle. What kind of girl doesn't respect herself? The mist guy finally yelled. Naruto snorted. The girl who knows the kind of man that you are, and I am also the girl that is going to kick all these villains' asses. With those words, the blonde-haired girl jumped into the main arena, where their teacher was still going through the villains like a cat playing with his prey. She did her job in sending someone that could help them escape, but now it was her turn to help their teacher beat these people up. She was going to show those villains why it was a bad idea to mess them up. Okako could only watch in amazement as her classmate defeated those villains like they were pests. How could Uzumaki do this? Wasn't her classmate scared? She knew that the girl was amazing since she had the highest score in the entrance exam, but doing well in the exam did not mean that she could go into battle like it was something normal. Uzumaki is terrifying, Shiro declared as their classmate dodged a villain's arm and smashed her hand against the man's chest. The brown-haired girl glanced at her classmate, who had faint red marks on his upper lips. It really did not surprise her since Naruto did use a technique that would cause any sane boy to bleed in his nose. We barely graduated from middle school and here she is, defeating these villains like they are nothing. It is because the girl got experience, 13 said as Aizawa wrapped his scarf around the villain. How do you know? Okako asked. The hero did not answer immediately. Instead, his eyes were fixed on their classmate, who barely flinched as a large villain towed over her. Despite the fact that the man looked like a mountain compared to their tiny classmate, the girl did a headlock with the man and sent him flying to the wall. The way that Uzumaki fight and her confidence shows someone that has experience with fighting villains. 13 pointed to Naruto's stance. Most beginners would be shaking in their feet or would have made more careless mistakes. The girl is still fighting like a mountain and none of the other villains can keep up with her. In fact, her speed is even greater than Eraserhead. You think that she is better than Aizawa-sensei? Mizo asked. 13 grimaced. It is hard to tell, but she is not a novice, that much I can confirm. I think that with more training, the girl could surpass a lot of pro heroes. Now, I can see why she kept insisting to fight with Eraserhead, but it is still reckless of her to do this. Uzumaki was not the type of girl that was reckless, Okako thought to herself as she stared at her classmate that was going through the villains like a tornado. From her battle with the girl, it had been obvious that all of her actions were calculated. She made traps when no one thought that she would, and she kept the strength of her quirk a secret. It just made no sense for her to be reckless. In fact, Deku always pointed out that their classmate was very calculative when it suited her. She never spoke about her quirk to Deku or showed it to him because she knew that he would analyze its strength and weakness. This was what her friend presumed, and looking at their classmate, she agreed with him. If she is experienced, then why did she join the hero course? She could have tried to apply for the provisional hero license exam without being in school. I overheard from Bakugo talking to Uzumaki about her reason for coming to this school, Okako admitted, glancing at her relaxed classmate. Despite the many villains that she was defeating, the girl was not even breaking a sweat. Their teacher was not going to accept her decision of working in a cafe and that he was willing to evoke it if it meant that she went to high school. Well, I'm glad that he said those words, Shiro declared as Naruto locked her legs around another villain's head and twisted it like it was a jar lid. Okako agreed because if it was not for Naruto then they would have been screwed over. With the number of villains decreasing, Naruto began to notice that there was one villain that seemed to be standing by the side. Was he the mastermind of this whole stupidity? The blonde-haired girl could not help but wonder as she did a sidekick to the henchman. She rolled her head to the left, grabbed hold of the other villain's arm and sent him flying to the air. No, the guy seemed too young to do this. But then again, what did she know? In the words of this part of the world, she was a child soldier. You're the boss? Aizawa-sensei asked, sending his scarf towards the young man, who seemed to be muttering to himself. The young man grabbed hold of the scarf, but that did not put her teacher off. Instead, the hero was running towards him, ducking the attack of the last remaining villain before elbowing him in the stomach. It is hard to tell when you are scampering around, but there are moments when your hair falls in front of your eyes, the man said, and to Naruto's disappointment, the villain had grabbed hold of her teacher's elbow. There was a chance that the man could attack her teacher. Every time you finish a given move, your max duration gets shorter and shorter. To her horror, her teacher's elbow was slowly starting to disintegrate. Shit, his quirk allowed him to disintegrate people? She grimaced and readied herself to fight the man. How could someone have such a dangerous quirk? God, how the hell did that man find out of his quirk? She could only imagine how messed up it would have been for him when he discovered it. She smashed her fist against the approaching villain and then stared at the villain in front of her. Your quirk isn't good for long group battles, the man pointed out. This is kinda different from your usual work, isn't it? You specialize in quick sneak attacks, yet you jumped right into this fight in the hopes of making the kid feel safe. By the way, hero, I'm not the boss here. Just as soon as he finished declaring those words, a large monster appeared behind her. Teacher. There was no words that could be used to describe how ugly it was, but there was one thing that Naruto was certain about. It was the fact that it was not human. If anything, it had a human body but with an exposed brain and a mouth that reminded her of a beak. She could hear the screams from her classmate, and turning her head around, Naruto could see 13 being ripped apart. Right next to her, she could hear another scream. Taking a deep breath, the girl turned her body around and watched in horror as the monster grabbed hold of her teacher and twisted his arm around. Run, Uzumaki. What can the Jinchuriki do? She couldn't even bring that Uchiha back. Could she even defeat that monster? She couldn't even bring back her best friend. How the hell could she even think of protecting him? She felt tears building up in her eyes. What the hell was she supposed to do? She wasn't strong enough to deal with this shit. Why the hell did she think that she could do this? She felt bile coming up her throat as the man began to twist his arm. She should run for safety. She should not allow herself to even consider saving him. She could not even save her best friend from a pedophile. What the hell makes her think that she could do this? She was not meant to be a hero. I'm sorry. With those words, the blonde-haired girl channeled her chakra into her fist and smashed it against the monster's head, freeing her teacher from the monster. She placed her hands into a familiar hand sign and a clone appeared. She might not have been able to save her teacher and she might be weak. Yet she could not abandon someone that needed saving. You chose the wrong person to piss off. Naruto felt the Kyuubi chakra leaking out of her, and for the first time in 2 years, she embraced the demon. Let me show you why you should be fucking terrified of a demon. She smashed her hands against the monster's chest, punching and kicking it while it tried to grab hold of her. Cracking a smile, the young girl grabbed hold of the monster's arm, twisted it around before smashing it down to the ground. She twisted her head away when the villain tried to grab hold of her, before punching him on the face. I will fucking kill you for hurting our teacher, the blonde yelled, continuing to punch the monster in the face. She blinked her eyes when the monster smashed his hand on her stomach, and without thinking, she spit out some blood. Rubbing her mouth, Naruto slammed her head against the monster's head before twisting its head. She kept punching the monster, hoping that she inflicted the same amount of pain that she made her teacher face. She barely flinched when the thing smashed his large fist against her stomach, tearing through her skin and muscles to form a hole. How the hell is she still fighting? There is a hole in her stomach. She kicked the monster in the shins and watched in satisfaction as the monster tumbled down to the ground. You were the fool that decided to attack the wrong group of student, she declared, twisting her head to look at the villain. Your first mistake was to think that a former kunoichi like me could not handle the Nomu. Your second mistake was making me pissed off, and your final mistake was attacking my friends and teacher. No one mentioned that there was a student that could be stronger than All Might, the villain complained. We should have brought more Nomu if there was a kid that could do this. We need to escape from here. The blonde-haired girl waited till the villains were gone before allowing herself to relax. Chapter 7a/n. I would like to thank everyone that added this story